Hi, welcome back to another episode of 20th Century Stories. I am your host, Alex. Today we have a very interesting episode about growing up as a child during World War II and during the Blitz in London and, well, all around the UK. And for this interview, I was joined by Eileen, who has been very kind to share her story with me and for me to share this story with all of you guys as well. Um, I think this story is very interesting, and I think it will interest you guys especially very much. And once again, I will be providing some information regarding the Blitz in London and in the UK before continuing with her interview. Between September 1940 and 1941, the UK endured a relentless bombing campaign by Nazi Germany, night after night and day after day. London and other major cities were lit up in fire due to this. Air raid sirens became part of daily life. Children were famously evacuated to the countryside to stay safe, and entire neighbourhoods in some parts of the UK were reduced to rubble. However, despite this, a spirit of resilience emerged, captured in the phrase "keep calm and carry on." Behind the headlines and history books are these human stories, raw human stories of courage and these memories which really deserve to be preserved. Today we are honoured to hear from someone who was only a child during this terrible time. This is not just any old story, it is a lived experience, a special one at that. So, without much further ado, please enjoy the story that Eileen has in store for us.
I was born into a very large family. I'm one of 11. I'm number 4 from what I call the top, which is the eldest. I had two older brothers and an older sister, and then I came along, and then the rest of them were younger than me. So we had quite a house full, but we didn't own the house. We only had rooms. We were tenants. We had 2 rooms, and the only toilet facilities was right at the bottom of the house, out in what we called a backyard, which existed of a wooden seat, newspaper cut up on a nail on string on the door, and it had a flushing system, because good job it did. But we weren't the only tenants in the house. And my brothers and sisters and I, when the doctor came to see us, if we had chicken pox or measles, he suggested we all got it together, and then he'd only have to make the one visit. So that was a good suggestion, because we got everything. And also, the government then also had what they called the tin hut, and that was on the main road, and that existed of examinations, if in case you've got anything physically wrong with you, like chicken pox, measles, because naturally the doctor would be very busy. So the government had this kind of scheme, which was very helpful for large families. We used it quite a lot, and it was a big help for getting us through it. The day war broke out, I was very surprised that we had our gas mask in a little wooden box on a string on our shoulder, and was told to keep it with us at all times. We were given a carrier bag, and in this carrier bag was a tin of corned beef and a tin of spam, and also a ration book, which was for whoever we were going to be billeted with would be able to get government allowance of food, because food was rationed. You could only have a certain amount per week per person. We went on a train, and I just thought we were going for a journey somewhere and coming back. But the train was all day, and we finished up in a place called Bristol. And when we got there, there was a large tin hut, just like an army hut. We were all in there, not just one school, but different schools from Coventry, London, and elsewhere. And we were with teachers, and also some parents came with their younger children. to be evacuated. So they were there helping to give us water or tea or biscuits or sandwiches, just until somebody that lived in that area would come and take us as an evacuee. An evacuee, the government paid them money, not a whole awful lot of money, but just enough to help towards our keep, our food, our washing, whatever. But these people opened up their homes to us, which was very kind because we were strangers. My mother told me that we mustn't part. There was myself, which was the eldest, and then there was my sister, who was younger than me, and then there was my young brother, and then there was a younger sister that I had to keep with me at all times. Her name was Joyce. Anyway, we were unfortunate because we wanted to be all together, and not many families could take 4 children. So we were the last ones in the hall, and it was getting late. Lucky enough, we had to agree that we would go into separate billets until they could sort us out the next day. But I was lucky because my young brother and sister was across the road from where I was. I was there longer than I thought we would be. My father and brother came down before Christmas to see us, and that was nice. They came down by train, and then they went home the next day. They stayed at Mrs. Williams, where my brother and sister was, across the road, and that was our first Christmas away from home, which was strange. It wasn't just the bombing that was getting bad then; it was a doodle bug which were flying over, and they were so bad when they came down, they took down a whole row of houses at a time. So naturally, air raid shelters, other than the underground, weren't of any use. So we just had to decide what was going to do next. I started work as a machinist in a place called Great Portland Street off of Oxford Street. And when you went up on the roof of this building, there was other people working in other floors besides the people I worked for. And when there was an air raid warning, you could either go down to the basement, which was below the lift to the building, or you could stay up in where you were working. My sister and I, we didn't want to go down in the basement, so we volunteered to be doodlebug watchers. So that meant we'd go up on the roof, look at the BBC, which was visible when you were up on the roof, only by the flags that flew. The flags that flew meant they were very similar to the flags that fly on an airport. Whether that's to see which way the wind's blowing, I don't know, but we had to watch it so that when it was at full mast, right the way up, that meant doodlebugs was within 5 mile radius of where the BBC was, which wasn't very far from us. So we had to push a bell to let the people that remained in the building know that the doodlebug was within 5 mile radius, and it was a danger zone, so they could either leave the building, stay in the basement, but the choice was up to individuals what they wanted to do. My sister and I weren't brave, but we discussed it with each other, and we thought if we were going to die, we would much rather die being blown up quickly than being buried with all the rest of that building on top of us in the basement. So that was our choice, to do the fire, what we call the fire watching, to push the bell and let them know that they could go to the shelter. So, as I say, we got quite a near view of one of the doodlebugs. It used to make a noise, and when you saw it, it looked like a flying torpedo. We saw one quite close, and once its engine stopped, it just floated down till it hit either houses, shops, whatever. But it was devastating because it could take down a whole row of houses and kill people in the street or in the houses. So my sister and I weren't heroes, but that's what our preference was, to be up on the roof rather than be buried amongst all the debris. And until they stopped sending the bugs over, my sister and I did that. But eventually, the firm I worked for moved out of that building, and we went to another building, which there was no roof because it was only two normal floors off of Oxford Street. And I stayed there then until I left I left the firm, which was quite a long time. But that was my experience of Doodlebug. My brother Porky was very clever. He won a scholarship and he went to Brompton Oratory, and we were very proud of him, especially my mum, seeing him in his Brompton Oratory uniform. My oldest brother was clever also, but I'm afraid circumstances was he didn't live long enough to achieve that kind of thing, because he volunteered and went in the army, in the Buffs, the Royal Buffs, because his friends did and he wanted to be with them. And while he was in the army, he got kidney problems, and I'm afraid when they took him to the military hospital in Kent and operated to remove his kidney, he didn't survive the operation, and he was only 19, which was a young age. And it was sadly missed because he was a lovely person, and it was very hard for my parents to lose their eldest son. But of course, life goes on, and there was the rest of us to grow up, decide on a career of some kind, and Porky did very well. As I say, he was an excellent diver, and he went into the Canadian unit, special unit, that used to dive into the sea where the Germans had put mines, at the undetected mines, but the only place that you could know that the mines were there was the metal rods that stuck out of the sea, and him and the unit used to have to go and disconnect them. And that's what they did on D-Day. They were disconnecting as many of these underwater mines so it wouldn't blow up the ships, or mostly the barges that contained the soldiers that were going to go in as far as they could to go on the shore to fight the enemy. But as I say, it wasn't a very pleasant job, and he lived to come out the Navy and have a family of his own. But unfortunately, in life, when he retired, he contacted cancer of the lung, and he didn't survive it. But he done his duty, and even though the years have gone by, he's still sadly missed, but remembered with affection. And he had no uniform, so he had the unfortunate business of finding a dead soldier to take his uniform off to put on himself, which was miles too big. He had to tie the waist up with string to keep the trousers up, but he couldn't walk around, not just him, but the other unit. They couldn't walk around in just swimming trunks. They had to have some form of a uniform on. So that's the unfortunate thing they had to do, was to find a dead body and fit the uniform on them as best they could. And that's how he arrived home from D-Day, in this uniform. And he couldn't speak. He was still in shell shock, I think. So we had to wait until he could sleep it off and find out exactly what went wrong or what happened to him, which stayed with him the rest of his life. I think it had gradually got better, gradually. So it didn't come quick. It was a gradual thing happening. Like petrol got easier. My sister and I, my older sister Hetty and I, we'd had a bad air raid one night, and we went out. We didn't go to bed. We was awake all night. We went out the next morning quite early, round about 6 o'clock, to see what damage had been done. But I'm afraid we saw things that we shouldn't have seen. We saw an open back lorry with 4 men in it, air raid wardens, somebody's father or brother or whoever, who've done voluntary work after their own job, got in the back of the lorry to go to wherever they were going to go, where people probably were buried alive, and a bomb dropped, and there was no blood or scars, but the blast from the bomb had stopped their hearts, and they were just sitting in the back of the lorry as if they were going to go away. I mean, they weren't a nice colour, but I think being nosy, my sister and I, it shook us that we were looking at 4 men whose hearts had stopped because of the blast of a bomb that had dropped quite nearby. And I think we learned a lesson from that, not to be so nosy the next time. But that's the things you saw.
And that marks the end of Eileen's story for us today. I hope you have enjoyed what she's had to offer. And please do keep in touch. Kind of make sure you keep checking back on the channel if you do enjoy my content, because in the next few weeks I have more interesting content lined up. Especially, well, I can't give too much away now, but I have some content lined up regarding more than just the UK, and especially London, because I know a lot of my episodes are focused on London specifically. But I have some episodes from other places around the world, such as China, such as Spain, and more. So please do make sure you keep checking back on this channel if you've enjoyed my content so far. Thank you.